Hello there, book friends, and welcome to my August wrap-up. I didn't actually do very well at my August TBR. I kind of felt more like reading lots of graphic novels, so I kind of abandoned it, but I will talk through that now. So, at the start of the month, I was at a little bit of a disadvantage. I hadn't finished reading my July books, so I was a little stressed, particularly when it came to reading The Boy and His Horse, because the month before I hadn't actually finished The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and I still haven't, because I suck. Yeah, I suck. I did warn you, however, that I probably was going to get overwhelmed by my last TBR, so can't really blame myself, to be perfectly honest. I saw it coming a mile off. On top of that, I couldn't actually get a natural history of dragons until August, so I also had that to read. But before we get to that, the first book that I read, or the first book I finished reading this month, was Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi. I gave this 4 stars. This is a YA paranormal romance dystopia kind of a jam. There's this girl called Juliet, and she has poison hands, or just hands that kill people, and she lives in this kind of post-apocalyptic world, and the government tries to use her as a weapon, and she's like, no thanks, fam. No thanks. I'm good. And basically it's very X-Men-y, it's very rogue-esque from X-Men. I gave this 4 stars. I was a little apprehensive going into it because a lot of people that I watched on BookTube had very mixed opinions. They didn't like Juliet, or they were very hard on it because it's slightly trashy YA. But I actually really enjoyed it. I haven't read trashy YA in a while now, so maybe my judgment is completely clouded. But I actually liked Juliet's character. She didn't annoy me, she wasn't insufferable. She didn't necessarily make the best decisions, but I can't really blame her for that. I love the writing style in this book, so there's lots of bits where stuff is crossed out in the text, or she repeats herself, or she says numbers instead of words, and I actually really enjoyed that. I felt that it was a very visual way of seeing a character grow and change, and I quite like the use of visuals in books, so that they're not just your classic like words on a page. I really enjoy it. So I actually really like this. I don't know how I feel about the love interest, but then again, I never know how I feel about love interests, almost ever, for the main character. I genuinely liked Warner as a villain. He was so slimy and gross and just diabolical and like thumb-twiddly that I actually genuinely loved it. I absolutely loved his fixation on Juliet. I felt that it was so, I was gonna say realistic, but not realistic. I mean, like, it was so just slimy and gross, and I love slimy, gross villains. Like, I cannot get over. If you can make my skin crawl, then you're a top tier villain, at least. It does sometimes read a bit like emo poetry, and I guess a lot of people don't like that, but I actually do like that. Like, bad emo poetry is my vice in life, so a lot of these tabs are bits where it gets really angsty. Like, I wonder about raindrops. I wonder about how they're falling down, forgetting their parachutes as they tumble out of the sky towards an uncertain end. That's very emo, and you know, some people don't stan that, but I stan it. There is a bit in this book that I actually really didn't like, and I'm just trying to find it. Oh, right, okay. So this is with the love interest. And a lot of people say this love interest is very insta-lovey, like the book is very insta-lovey. But I would argue that the insta-love is very justified because our main character has been locked away without any human contact for a very, very long time. And on top of that, even when she did have human contact, even when her, like, she wasn't in an institution all by herself, her parents weren't loving towards her at all. And so I think it makes a lot of sense at the moment someone's interested and there's a plot point about this and all of that kind of stuff, that she does very much fall in love with that person. Because, as she says many times, she's never thought of that being a possibility for her. So, however, there is a very particular thing that he says, which is so gross, and I just kind of put the book down and I was like, ew, ew. And that is, I'm sorry, he says, it's so hard for me to stop myself. I don't know about you guys, but like, a guy being like, oh, it's really hard for me to stop myself in a sexual context is really, really, really scary and gross. It's like, I get like low-key rapey vibes from that, and I'm not here for it at all. So I will roast this book on that, but that is the only instance of it in this particular book. I have got the rest of the series, which I do plan to read. It's in my current pile of paranormal romance books, but like, I'm just not here for that particular description. I gave this 4 stars because I did actually really enjoy it. It was very entertaining. It was easy to read. It was very visual. I really got sucked into the story, and it's very addictive. This book is super addictive. Like, you pick it up and then you're like, oh, I'll just read for 5 minutes, and then you're like 10 chapters later like, oh, what just happened? You know? And it has short chapters, which is an absolute love of mine. Like, a love of my heart is a short chapter because you just go through it so quick. The next book I read this month was a library loan. It was a loan of the audiobook, which was released by Patrick Ness. I really, really love this. It basically follows our character Adam on the worst day of his life. Like, it's terrible. So much bad shit happens to him. This is a character who is, a big part of his life is that he's gay and he's getting over this ex, but also his father is an evangelical preacher and a lot of stuff happens. And there's also this like weird, airy forest queen nature thing that's going on about a girl who died recently from Adam's town, and I liked it, and I like how it was worked into the ending, but up until the ending I really didn't care that much because it did feel a little bit shoehorned in, and I usually like these elements, but I just don't think it intersected with the plot enough, like the main plot for me, and that's why it was a 4-star and not a 5-star. After that I read Mercury by Larson, which was a graphic novel. I read quite a few of those this month. This one was set in Canada. It had 2 plots, it had a split timeline of this girl's family. It's hard to explain what this is about without spoiling the plot, but we open with Tara, I believe her name was, and her house is burned down, and so she's living with her cousins, and she's going to she's going to high school with people that she used to go to school with, after she's been homeschooled for a couple of years, and it really is a very much reflection on your family in both stories. I don't really know what else to say about it. I gave it a 3-star. I wasn't like the biggest fan of it, to be honest. I think it was a good historical graphic novel, and I don't think there are enough of those, but at the same time I just wasn't really that bothered by it. Like, I read it and then I consumed it, and it wasn't much more than that. So I can't really rate it higher than a 3. I don't think it was bad. I just don't really think it was anything. It was kind of like a meh. Next, I read the absolute best book that I've read in a while, and I'm so happy about it. And I have Rachel Marie to kind of thank for it, because I only heard about it from the book Junkie Trials, because lots of people were reading it for that, and that is A Natural History of Dragons. I took it out from the library. I was so excited to read it. I left reading it until really late and had to read it in the space of 4 days. So that was stressful. And also I was really upset because I realised I couldn't annotate the library book. But it was absolutely phenomenal, and I have actually already picked up the second one. I just need to tell you about this book. So basically, it's like an expedition journal from Charles Darwin or whatever, but it's in a world where dragons exist. Obviously, it's a series. So in the first one, we follow Isabella really coming to know her obsession with dragons, and she talks about the lack of research, and all the world building is kind of in the first half of the first book. We learn that there isn't much research to do with dragons, and that's what Isabel would do, but she lives in a time which reflects the time that Charles Darwin was about. It's not set in England or whatever, it's set in a different world with different names, but obviously it's very, very closely mirrors our own. So as she's a lady, she is expected to get married and have children, and gossip, and that's about it. But she has this fascination, and I genuinely absolutely adored it. I think people who are expecting like a fast pace, like, oh, now I'm catching the dragons, now I'm riding the dragons, that kind of stuff, really, really won't get it. It's very much more of a slow driving plot. Well, it gets faster. Towards the end it really picks up, but it is much more slow because they're researching, they're scientists, they're going, but this book made me cry. I didn't see the plot twist coming. It feels much more real than most fantasy science fiction books that you could read. It's not like, you know, science fiction realism, but it's very true to how I would imagine the time period that it's reflecting to be. And if you're into that kind of thing, I cannot recommend this to you enough. It was such a delightful read, and I just cannot wait to read A Tropic of Serpents. I just can't. I love Isabella / Lady Trent so much. Next I read 3 more graphic novels from the library. So first I read The Three Rooms in Valerie's Head by David Garfrey, something like that. David something. This was a really weird graphic novel. It was kind of like surrealist, and that was kind of the point, and I got that that was the point, but I don't know. Basically, we're looking inside of Valerie's mind, and the rooms she has in her mind where she keeps her ex-boyfriends, and she talks to them and she reflects on everything that goes on. But each story we get about each boyfriend is slightly surreal in some sort of way, and I don't really know what it was trying to tell me. This is the point that I'm kind of getting to, is I don't really know what it was trying to tell me, and that's why it has 3 stars. I don't have any opinions on it because I like surrealist stuff when it's done right, and it's either trying to tell you something or it's more of an artistic. It's more like an art piece than a graphic novel, which will come to you later because one of the things that I read definitely was that. But it just didn't say anything for me, and I just didn't really get it. I don't think it was for me. So I ended up giving it 3 stars because I don't think it's bad. I just think it was meh. It was boring. Again, it was boring. I wasn't having much luck with the graphic novels from the library, but then again, these weren't things that I specifically went out to seek. These were things that I picked up when I was just in there pondering. The next one I read was In Real Life by Cory Doctorow or something like that. It follows the story of like a girl. We're not entirely sure how old she is. She's in high school, I think, at least. She is a bigger girl, so there is fat rep in this, which I did appreciate first and foremost. Basically an ambassador for this MMO, massive multiplayer online game. Basically she comes to have a talk at the school and try and encourage girls to get into gaming, and she said that girls don't play as female avatars on these sorts of sites, and I don't really know if that's true. I don't know the statistics about it, but personally, as a girl who likes to play video games, it just seemed a bit weird to me, because girls wouldn't necessarily harass, because lots of guys use female avatars as well, but I digress, whatever. That's just the premise. And basically, if you get good enough, you have a temporary thing in being in the group, this like renowned group, and if you get good enough in 3 months, then you get to stay. And basically it was about her making friends with a boy in China who had to be a gold miner in this game, which is a real thing that happens in real life. But again, I think the art was beautiful. I think that the story was okay. I actually did understand what what the message was supposed to be about. It was about looking at social and economics on the internet, and how different places have different standards of what they give their workers, and how people can be penalised for things like that. However, lots of things that happened were a little bit glossed over. The ending, the wrapping up, making everything into a cute, nice bow really renders a lot of the stuff that happens null and void, and this happens in many aspects in this graphic novel, and I just didn't appreciate that. I love the message that it was trying to show, and the message that anyone can do something to help a situation, to try and encourage change. But at the same time, I just felt like, because you've wrapped this up at the end into a nice little bow, because you don't want to scare children, or you don't want it to be anything sad in the ending of this game, I just don't think it worked. And so I gave it 3 stars. Next is a graphic novel I literally read on the last day of this month, which was on my TBR, so at least we have that. And this was actually one I really, really enjoyed. So it's How to Tell If Your Cat is Plotting to Kill You. For me, this was genuinely a 5-star read. It was so funny, and it really helped me at the moment because I don't have any cats. I really miss having cats, but all my cats have passed away now. When I go home, there aren't even any cats there. When I go to my grandmother's, there's not even any cats there anymore because all of hers are passed too. So this really helped me deal with that, because it is very recent that I don't have any cats anymore, and it just made me giggle. It just made me giggle. It gave me everything that I thought it was gonna give me. I think honestly this panel here is my favourite. I genuinely start to realise how similar I am to a cat with attention, and there were some things about sexuality that were a bit ooh in the section of how to tell if your cat is a raging homosexual. That was a little bit weird, but at the same time, I understand that it's a joke. It's not meant to be serious. So the last book that I read in August is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I haven't finished this. I think it was 77% of the way through on Goodreads. Yeah, so I am literally right at the end now. I will probably finish this in the next couple of days. I genuinely love this. It's very, very graphic. If you don't like graphic violence, gore, there's a very graphic depiction of rape in this book, but if you can read that, then I would really recommend this. There are 2 main characters. One is really boring, which is Mikael. It's set in Sweden. He is basically a financial journalist who likes to expose people, and he's basically just been disgraced, and he gets asked by this dude to look into the murder of his niece, and it's following that. And then the cooler character who I personally connected with so hard is Lisbeth Salander. She is the girl with the dragon tattoo. She's basically just this alternative queen who's really, really smart and really good at her job at the security firm. She basically looks into people and it's who you want to go to if you want to know if someone has a scandal behind them. She does get into a lot of trouble though, and one of her boss, Armansky, describes her as the perfect villain. She is very antisocial, very hard to get to know. She doesn't really want to talk or have anything to do with other people. She doesn't even have legal rights because she was put under state guardianship. She does fight against that, but yeah, she is completely fully capable, but she's just so antisocial that she gets herself into a bit of a pickle. But at the same time, I can see why she needs to look after, because there are certain things that happen in this book and her responses to it are kind of like, ah, shit. It is very clearly made out by Larson that she could have taken a completely different route, but she can't fathom it, or she doesn't think that way. Everything is much more difficult for her in that respect. But yes, I am almost at the end. I predict this is going to be a 5-star read, but the ending might let me down, so don't hold me to that. So I have some things to apologise for, namely these books, which I just did not read. I just didn't read them. And I don't know when I'm going to read them, but when I read them, I read them. And I'm not going to feel guilty about not fulfilling how many books the books that I was supposed to read, because I think that giving yourself a really strict TBR is a really quick way of getting into a reading slump. So I'm glad I mood read this month, even if I do feel like I need to step up my allotting time to reading game. So the best bit, my favourite bit, is the statistics. So this month I read 9 books, 3 of which were from my TBR. I read 2,145 pages in total, and for a genre breakdown I read 1 mystery thriller, 5 graphic novels, 1 sci-fi, and then for YA I read 1 contemporary with weird fantasy elements, and 1 YA fantasy paranormal. And as far as ratings goes, I had 0 1 stars, 0 2 stars, 3 3 stars, 3 4 stars, 2 5 stars, which makes my average rating for this month 3.4 stars, which is not great. I hope to improve that next month. So overall, I had a bit of a reading month. I read more than I was supposed to. I didn't read what I was supposed to, but I did read more than I anticipated. I don't know whether I feel that this is a successful wrap up, but I will be glad to see you in the next video either way. Bye, book friends!